I might need a bit more of an introduction. I'm newer to the scene here in Iowa politics. My name is Hexter. I'm a 25-year-old. This is my first time running for the Iowa State House. What really thrills me about the state of Iowa are our two most recent state slogans: fields of opportunity and freedom to flourish. And as a young person here, those are things that brought me in and made me want to stay here. But when I look around and I look at the generations, we see that the young people are leaving the state in large numbers. We have to ask ourselves, why is that happening? The reason that I'm running for Iowa State House is to make this place livable for all generations who are currently living here and the future generations. I've been lucky enough to be involved in Iowa politics and community for the last several years. I serve on the Powashik Soil and Water Conservation District, and I work for the Iowa Farmers Union as a policy organizer. I'm also the director of a nonprofit in Grinnell called Grinnell Farm to Table. We provide food access to local farmers. And ever since I got involved in politics, I think this is something that a lot of you all can relate with. People don't like talking about politics much anymore. It's gotten so divided. And particularly, we've got this red and blue, and people don't want to talk across those issues. We've seen a lot of these issues really divide us and tear apart our communities. Now, the issue with that is when neighbors are no longer talking about politics, not talking about the issues that really impact them, that's when the government can come in and do things because the people are unaware. And while I respect my opponent and his work in the Iowa State Legislature, and I respect the government leadership here in the state, I'm deeply concerned when I look around our communities and I see the quality of life decreasing around us. And I think that Iowa deserves better, deserves a fresh look for the future. We have the issues of the brain drain, like I talked about, young people leaving our state. We're drastically losing farms over time. The number of farms has cut in half over the last 70 years. Food insecurity is at an all-time high right now. Our cancer rates are second in the nation. All of these things are signifying that we need new leadership in Iowa, and they're signs that one party has too much control. And I believe if it were an option, I would have run as an independent, because that's what it takes to represent all Iowans and not just people in one particular party. My slogan is regenerate Iowa, because I believe we need to start thinking about how we invest in our state again. Thank you. Well, Dean and I, we sat down and talked about these topics, and we each chose three that really mattered to us. And I really appreciate that way of doing this dialogue. So about gender issues, I want to make something overabundantly clear to start here. If you are a transgender person, or a non-binary person, or you express your gender in any number of ways, man, woman, or whatever, I love you. There's nothing wrong with you. There's people in this world who will want to tell you that you are mentally ill or that you've fallen from the graces of God, and I don't believe that. Sitting down with Dean and deciding on the topics of this debate, this was the number one topic he wanted to talk about. He's been very active about it in the legislature, and you'll all get to hear his opinions on it in a minute. But in my opinion, he has a very straightforward answer to this question. He believes that there's only two genders. This is based in his faith, in the Bible, and that the non-binary people are mentally ill, need coaching. And so he sponsored legislation that would remove transgender people and any gender identity from the rights in the Iowa Human Rights Act, so that they could not. It is true, and we will defend that in a minute. I also approach this issue based on my faith. I'm a Christian. When I read the Bible, I see that Jesus always sides with those who are vulnerable. He sided with prostitutes, with beggars, with people with leprosy, the people who were targeted by those in power. And when I look at what's happening, with transgender people in Iowa, they are being targeted. They are dealing with abuse every day in our dialogue. They're dealing with hatred that comes from a place that I don't know. I don't understand why we have to target people for being who they are. Accepting transgender folks, all gender identities, and all minority groups is what makes us strong as a nation. America was founded as a melting pot of immigrants and people who were rejected and persecuted in the countries that they came from. And it's true that these things also represent change. We should not be afraid of change, because when we embrace people and we challenge ourselves to love people who are different than us, we become stronger, we become more diverse, and it's in that diversity that we learn to be better people together. Just a couple of quick facts. Iowa is 49th out of 50 states for the number of transgender and non-binary people. 3 out of every 1,000 people in this state identify as non-gender or trans. And so, this is really not a major issue in the state of Iowa. When people are suffering on a daily basis, our schools are suffering, hospitals and healthcare are suffering, our small towns are collapsing, we can spend our time getting nitpicky about this and basically telling people they don't have the right to exist. And my opponent has worked on 8 bills over the last two sessions about transgenderism. Or we can spend our time actually fixing the problems that everyday Iowans see. And I think that that's what we need to do. Republican arguments to ban abortion put abortion in the same category as a crime like murder. It's basically saying that people are trying to commit a murder against a life. Criminalizing abortion demonizes women and healthcare professionals. It starts with a basis of mistrust in the good intention of our women and our doctors. And I'm sure that a number of people in this room know folks who have experienced an abortion and know how excruciating that is. And it's often only used as a last resort. We need to be supporting women who have issues with their reproductive health care and not trying to outlaw them. Now, Mr. Fisher has commented that this is a Republican-Democrat issue. That's clearly not the case in a state where Iowa has a Republican majority of voters. A poll that came out last Sunday says that 60% of Iowans disapprove of the new restrictions on abortions in Iowa. 64% of Iowans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases, which is a new high in the poll since 2008. People on both sides of the aisle believe that women should have access to reproductive health care. And there's reasons why. One, this ban will not stop people from getting abortions. They will either do it in unsafe ways or they will leave our state and do it elsewhere. Abortions are going to happen. They've been happening for thousands of years. Two, this puts doctors in an incredibly unfair situation, deciding what is a medical emergency. It doesn't make it clear what a medical emergency is. And so now a doctor has a dying woman in front of him, and he has to decide, can I do this abortion or not? Is it medically necessary? And they risk losing their license for decisions like this. And really, this is a true issue that is being faced around the nation right now. For this reason, this ban is contributing to a much larger issue in Iowa, which is that we have the lowest per capita ratio out of all states and territories, 52 out of 52, in OBGYN providers. Over a third of Iowa's counties are maternity care deserts, and Iowa's infant mortality rate is on the climb. If we are trying to make this a place where people can start families, and honestly, think about the next generation, we need to make sure that people and doctors have the full range of options to reproductive health care in front of them. I've spoken to so many young women who say, I could never live in a state where there's a 6-week abortion ban. People are not bad at heart. The attempts to outlaw abortion and also the attempts to remove transgender folks from this human rights code are inevitably based in a belief that people are bad. And I believe that people are good. They are not trying to do bad things. And so I would urge you to look at others with love rather than hatred. I do believe in the sanctity of life from the moment of conception. I sure do. But I know that women need to have freedom over their own bodies with the help of doctors making this decision. There is no room for the government to get involved here. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Budget and taxes. Well, I'm no businessman, but I do run a nonprofit, so I kind of know how budgets work a little bit. The Republican strategy over the past few years, and what we heard from Dean in his intro, is that we're in a really strong position financially as a state. That's a great thing. You know, we have a $2 billion surplus right now. We have to ask ourselves, though, what are we doing with that $2 billion surplus? And I want to make the argument that just as overspending, going into debt is fiscally irresponsible, underspending is also fiscally irresponsible. We can't be so frugal with our budget that we are forgetting to fix the leaks in our roof. The current government seems to be saving up money for a rainy day. And folks, let me tell you, the rainy day is here. It really is. Iowa needs investment again. So in 2023, Iowa has almost $2 billion in surplus. I'm an Iowa taxpayer. I see the lack of funding going to our public services, and I'm upset that I'm paying taxes and they're not all getting to help Iowans. The fact that we are underspending is causing major damage to our state, and we see it in the communities around us. For instance, I've heard that there is only one licensed physician who visits Tama on a weekly basis. We have food insecurity rising to all-time highs, and our state is spending very little to invest in food banks and food pantries. We are 39th worst in preschool funding. We have the second worst bridges and infrastructure in the nation. We used to be ranked 5th in education. We're quickly dropping. We're now 13th. And more than half of Iowa's lakes and streams are impaired, which means they are not able to be used for their intended purpose. The government has the money to be spent. It's the time to spend it now. I believe that we should be spending every year 90 to 95% of our budget back into Iowa's economy and supporting small businesses, small communities, and services like our EMS, like our healthcare providers, like our public schools. What's the point in sitting on a pile of money if we don't do anything with it? And so I see, I'm not proposing that we spend more than we're calling in, but if I'm paying taxes, I want to know that my money is going to help the state. And I respect the great conservative argument of lowering taxes and saving up. I can't argue against that. It's money in the bank, right? But when we have very real issues facing Iowans, it's time to address them. It's time now. It's time yesterday to stop sitting on this money. And I just want to point out a couple other things that has happened in our state budget over the past few years, including, our state right now likes to give tax incentives and tax breaks to large out-of-state corporations to move into our state, including the Iowa Fertilizer Company, which you might have heard of, went out of business and was sold to the Koch brothers this year, which is the largest fertilizer company in the world. So the state invested $550 million in tax breaks in this company. Then they went and sold out. So I think we need to be investing our tax breaks in small businesses and in small farmers and young farmers. We can actually give these people tax breaks, but instead, we've just been giving tax breaks to the wealthiest landowners and out-of-state corporations. So I'm also in support of tax breaks, but just for real people and not for mega corporations. You guys are all going to be happy on this one because it's one Dean and I agree on. We actually, working for the Farmers Union, we got to work on the same side of this issue, and it really is a unifying issue across Iowans. Before I go any further, Dean, I want to ask, how are they going to get the CO2 to South Dakota for the methanol?
They're building, the plan is they would build this plant that would convert methanol, convert it to methanol right next to the ethanol plant. So they pair up, and the methanol plant was producing, I think the numbers was 55 million gallons of methanol, could produce about 33 million gallons of methanol, so it's a good match.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we agree landowner rights should not be violated. This is a scheme by companies to make lots of profits off of a federal tax credit that should not exist to pipe carbon under the ground. It's not safe for Iowa's communities. There are many reasons this pipeline should not happen. However, there's many of Dean's colleagues in the Senate and the Republican Party who do think this pipeline should happen. And I think it's important to point this out because this pipeline issue is a canary in the coal mine for Iowa. It's representative of a much larger issue that we are coming up against, and that is that the ethanol industry is struggling to be profitable right now. According to the Iowa Farm Bureau, the ethanol industry has been declining steadily since 2000 and dropped into negative profitability in 2019, 2020, and 2021. This is bad news for farmers. Farmers need that market for ethanol. However, this project would capitalize on almost $1.5 billion annually of annual tax credits, federal tax credits, to increase ethanol revenue so they can stabilize prices for corn farmers. It's being propped up by very powerful people in Iowa for that reason, so that the ethanol industry can continue to succeed. So, if we are going to oppose the pipeline, which I strongly suggest that we do, we need to start getting ready for what comes after corn ethanol. We need to start having that conversation. And so when in office, I want to support programs like the program that Dean mentioned, Choose Iowa. Right now that program is funded at under $1 million. I think it should be closer to Florida's level where they're funding it at $50 million. We need to start doing alternative crop research, other ways, particularly maybe growing hemp, because this product has been shown that it can be used efficiently for energy and other things. And we need to invest in state conservation programs that incentivize farmers and related businesses to diversify their farms and create new models of revenue that look beyond corn ethanol. This issue really is a sign the ethanol industry is going downhill. We need to start looking forward. I think there's only so much that we can do with corn and soybeans that's going to make a profit for farmers, and we're starting to see the limits of that. And farmers' margins are getting thinner and thinner, and all the companies that support corn and soybean production are getting richer and richer. We need to start asking ourselves, what are the crops outside of corn and soybeans that we can grow on this, the most fertile land in the United States of America and the world, that are going to give farmers more profit and require less inputs and less turning corn into refrigerators and that sort of stuff. Let's grow some real crops on this land and use this opportunity to look forward at what Iowa can be. This is another one where I feel like we can get a lot of unity, and that's really all our issues here tonight. We're all Iowans. There's a lot more similar about us than different. I think we can all agree that education is a top priority for us. We know that supporting our children is very important. I'm glad to see so many children in the room here tonight getting their education in politics. And if we believe in education, if we want to invest in the future of the next generation of Iowa, we need to invest more in our public education system. As we talked about earlier, we've got a $2 billion surplus right now, and it's embarrassing that we have a surplus like this, and yet I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a single school district around the state who has not been devastated by budget cuts. The realities of underfunding are hitting home with school boards, teachers, parents, students, everybody. Everybody's talking about public education getting underfunded. And we need to do something to address this. There are 3 ways that our state government has directly gone against public education here. We have the AEA cuts and just general cuts to the budget. Grinnell School District cut nearly $1 million from the budget this year. It's not just staff cuts and funding cuts. There are 17 school districts that have had to go down to a 4-day school week. AEA programs have been cut so that students can't get critical access to mental disability services or mental health services and disability education. And I understand that schools are able to use their funds for that used to be allocated to AEAs in their general fund, but if you're a small school district and you're having to choose between mental health care and keeping your band going, how do you make that choice? And school districts should not have to choose between that. And this cutting of the AEAs primarily hurts small school districts. The ESA program is another one. We've all heard of this. This is the private school voucher program, where they're taking funding from our public schools and giving it to private schools. Now, I support private schools. I went to a private school through 5th grade. However, I don't think that a public money should ever go towards a private institution. This is the same logic that we follow when talking about the CO2 pipeline. We have recognized that the CO2 pipeline is not a public good and therefore it should not be backed by the public to support private gain. We need to follow that logic and realize we should not be using public dollars to fund private schools. First thing, when you go home tonight, go look up school districts cutting their budgets in Iowa. Pretty much every school district around the state has been forced to cut their budget year after year. That's an issue we need to address. Regarding the AEAs, I'm glad that the AEAs are being reformed. I think this is necessary. Pulling funding from them, though, without looking and doing a study first was harmful. It hurt people, and it's having impacts on our students right now. Regarding the private school voucher program, yes, this makes it possible for low-income students to attend private schools. But private schools don't have to accept everybody. Private schools can turn away any student. And 42 counties in Iowa do not have private schools. This is not a fair bill that works in favor of all Iowans. And it is also a bill that next year will be open to all Iowans regardless of income eligibility, which is a deep issue that needs to be solved. Even 100 millionaires could be collecting on our taxpayer dollars to send their kids to private school. We need to change that program. All right, are we having fun yet? The environment is why I first got involved in Iowa politics, and it's one of my favorite issues to talk to voters about because everyone can agree. We love nature, we love clean water, we like natural beauty, we like trees. Nobody doesn't. It's something that's deep within us as humans. So we need to prioritize that in this state. As Dean said, he sits at the head of the Environmental Protection Committee in a very crucial time in Iowa's history where we are facing very real environmental concerns. Now let's just do some facts. Less than 0.1% of Iowa's original landscape remains. We live in the most altered ecosystem in the entire world. In 1850, the average topsoil in Iowa was 14 inches. In 2020, we are sitting between 4 and 5 inches statewide. At this rate, we can expect we will no longer have topsoil in the next 50 years. Because of the topsoil runoff and the nutrients it creates, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources this year said that 52% of Iowa's rivers and 63% of Iowa's lakes are impaired and polluted, not able to be used for their intended purposes. This is caused by nitrate from ag runoff, and E. coli from animal manure, things like the CAFOs that Dean was talking about. I know CAFOs can be a good thing, but we have way too many of them. There's the equivalent manure of 110 million humans being produced in this state every year, and we are spreading that on our farmland. The CAFO bills that Democrats are proposing put a moratorium on new CAFOs so that we do not keep growing the number, because we already have too much manure, and it is causing very real pollution. So these environmental concerns are starting to have real impacts, not just on the environment, which should be enough in and of itself, but on our human health. One of the biggest things I hear when I go to the doors is concern about the cancer rates. And if we think that the cancer rates are not rising because of the agricultural industry that we live in, we're misled. We need to start addressing this in serious ways. Some of the solutions I would propose are paying farmers for mandatory riparian buffers alongside major creeks and rivers. We should be funding our land-grant institutions to do research on new farming methods that involve chemical-free production and restoring native lands. And we should be investing in our public parks, our state parks, and young people to take care of them. Because young people do want to do things like burn prairie, seed prairie, take care of natural land. And I believe that we should have a habitat corridor that goes all the way through our state so that we can start to get some of the species that were here before we got here back. And as the chair of the Environmental Protection Committee, I just want to ask, what have you done and what do you plan to do to address these issues? Who here thinks that Iowa is clean and beautiful and pristine? Who thinks that we've got some environmental concerns? Yeah, I think we do. And just a couple things. Point out here, Chris Jones was one of the leading water science folks in the state of Iowa who worked at the University of Iowa. He's written several books. He was publishing for almost 30 years. He lost his job because he was putting out research that was time-tested, that was very clear about the water quality impacts of CAFOs in agriculture. We need to start taking these things seriously. There is science behind it. I'm not talking about penalizing farmers, but I'm talking about recognizing the challenges that we have and taking environmental protection seriously. Raccoon bounty programs are not going to cut it for environmental protection in our state. We have very serious concerns. If I'm elected and I'm able to do what I can to get this program repealed, there will be no oversight of the state voucher program because it will not exist anymore. It's a fraudulent program. In a world where it does exist, I think we need to be asking ourselves these questions very seriously, as we've already come across a case where our state auditor has gone in and determined that there was overspending happening. They're already going ahead of what the budgets projected were, and they're coming up on it next year expecting to spend $375 million on this program. So we need to be asking ourselves, they said it was going to be this amount of money, and all of a sudden it's looking like a lot more, and that this is going to start eating at our pockets. Now, with regards to what the private schools need to be doing to be monitored for student achievement and also accessibility, I think that if this program is going to continue, two things. Number one, we need to cap the income level for eligible individuals. That should have been started at the beginning. No one making over 200% of the federal poverty line should be eligible for this. Second, if we are going to be using public dollars from public schools to send kids to private school, everybody needs to be allowed to go to private school. Schools that receive these vouchers need not have a rejection process. They should not be able to reject a student if they are going to be using state dollars for public schools. I don't know if Tama County has a private school yet, but we all know that it soon will. And Representative Dean Fisher is sponsoring it after this voucher program starting his own private school. And, this is a question of resource allocation. We see that our education system is struggling. I'm not going to be up here and say our public education is perfect. But when we're talking about dividing limited resources, why would we create both public schools and private schools so we have to split the funds rather than focusing on the established, oldest time school system that our state has been working with for 150 years, that we are proud of? We are top 20 in the nation still. We should be spending all of our resources focusing on our public schools and not dividing, because both will be weak. People in here know that the intent of librarians at schools is not to give books with pornographic content to children. It's fear-mongering what's happening here. It's a distrust in librarians. Book banning is something that has been done throughout history to censor people, censor new ideas, and it's been used in very dangerous societies. And I don't need to name them, but it's been used time and time again to restrict ideas. If you want to go look up other cultures that have banned books, you should do that. I don't think we want to be counted among those. However, I also agree we should not be having pornographic books in schools, but we need to look long and hard at what the list of banned books is, because I just did a little Google here, and I could see The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is now showing up on that banned books list. 1984, Slaughterhouse-Five. These are books that you read when you went to school. Are you worse off for it? No. These are things that are important for children to read, and they should have access to books. Censorship is a sign of a government that is trying to control its people to think a certain way, and we need to make sure that we have the freedom to read the books that have made us a great nation. I guess my recommendation would be for people who do want to have the school library censored is go to a private school. This is an extremely important issue. Healthcare, dental care, mental health care is now being called brain health per Iowa code. These are all issues that are severely impacting our rural communities across the country. Rural communities, we all experience it. We simply don't have access to the kind of care that we need. I've experienced this in my own family, trying to find adequate home health care for my mother has been extremely challenging, even though we do have good health insurance. There just isn't the level of providers that we need in this state. And so we need to be actively investing and incentivizing ways to bring these providers back to our rural communities. And I guess I would look at it the same way as we're thinking about how are we gonna incentivize and support our small businesses. We need to make it a fair economic playing field so that people want to come here. Right now, people want to flee here because there isn't the money in getting a doctor or a dentist or a mental health provider. And so recognizing that you're not going to be able to get providers, the same kind of large clientele that might be able to get in a city, we need to go to extra measures in rural areas. The same policies that work to increase healthcare in cities do not work in rural spaces. We need to start being creative and realizing the deserts that we have and the ways that they're, leaving us all high and dry without healthcare. And so I would propose starting, pilot programs to bring in doctors, mental health providers, and dentists to every rural county, and making sure that these are backed by our state's $2 billion surplus so that these people can feel that they have justification to live in a rural town, even though the clientele might not be as large. Because if I know anything, rural people are just as important, if not more important, than city folk. We live out here, and it's not easy, and we provide food for the world. We do all this, and we deserve to have that kind of care. And so our state needs to go above and beyond in incentivizing healthcare providers, because that's just the only way that we are going to bring those providers to Iowa. What can we do to use economic development funds to bring in these providers in a real way so that we aren't in a situation where we only have one physician who visits Tama once a week? There should be these people in every county, and so I'll just leave it at that. We need to be actively incentivizing, using economic development to bring these people to our rural towns. So I bet, I'm a member of Generation Z, and also known as Gen Z. And I think I've heard a lot of times, and I bet a lot of you folks in this room have said to someone in Gen Z, you're the generation that's going to save the world. That's a tall order. It is. And we don't know exactly what it means, but we've got a lot of ideas, creativity, and energy, and passion to do that. The truth is now that most people in my generation live in coastal and urban areas. Young people are increasingly leaving rural Iowa and America. If I'm elected at this critical juncture when young people are leaving, I will be the first representative under the age of 30 serving this district since 1866. And I know that investing in me with your vote is an investment in the future of Iowa, and I do not take that lightly. And I've been working, I have a campaign team, we've been working every day. Every week we have 20 to 25 canvassers out. We have a website you can go visit. We have social media. And everywhere where we're invited or not invited, we're showing up to speak and meet with voters. Running for office is not something I would have done had it been my choice. But I was asked to because I'm someone who's got, I don't know what I have. But people asked me to do this, and I'm answering the call because I believe in the future of Iowa, and I believe we need some young voices in politics, fresh perspectives. Running as a Democrat here has been particularly challenging. Democrats become a bad word in a lot of rural areas. But I'm proud going to bed every night because I know that I'm not just a Democrat. I'm trying to be a representative of all people of this House district, not just people on one side of the party. And I will stand up for small businesses, small farms, the environment, minority groups, women's rights, and quality education and healthcare for Iowans. I'm so humbled to be up here tonight. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm really grateful for the relationship that Dean and I have forged, working in the State House together the past couple of years and as we've been campaigning. And I hope that as a community, we can continue to have important civic dialogue about the issues that are impacting our communities. Come together, realize we're all Iowans at the end of the day. Thanks for coming.